Hey, welcome to the first episode of Jacob Wayne Albummin It. I just came up with that title right before I pressed record. It's a terrible title, but whatever. It's not like it means that much to me. I even considered just calling it Jacob Wayne Reviews Music or Jacob Wayne Album Reviews. So Jacob Wayne's Albummin It, whatever. Let's go with it. So the first record I chose to review, as of right now, I only want to do pretty much new releases. I landed on the Killers' Pressure Machine. Let me make sure I even got that title. Yeah, Pressure Machine. For some reason, I'm second guessing. Why the Killers' Pressure Machine? I kind of thought about starting this video trying to explain where I come from as a listener, and that kind of seemed boring. And as you watch more of these, hopefully you'll get a sense of where I come from musically and what I'm into and why. But let's just put it this way. Right off the bat, anyways, I'm a bass player. Played music since I was in high school, which was a long time ago. Not as long as some folks, of course, but yeah, it's getting further away. And so I've been obsessively listening to music for most of my life, if not the whole time, just not as aware when I was younger. And I've always been a bass and drums kind of guy. I love rhythm. I love just the core elements of songs and lyrics. While I love them and appreciate them, they usually don't come to me and really have any impact, if at all, until later. So I would say those elements are important to know. Grew up being a metalhead, but loved listening to pop music, usually 10 years after, like let it get old for a little bit and then I can start to appreciate it. So once again, Killers. Why the Killers? Lead singer Brandon Flowers, just barely learned that name, by the way. This is not a band I know too well. He grew up in Nephi, Utah, and I grew up in Logan, Utah. And apparently this new record is all about him growing up in Nephi, Utah. So I was intrigued. As far as what I knew about the Killers before this, I got to take a look at their song names real quick. Mr. Brightside, didn't like that song at all. When that first came out, everybody loved it. I was like, but when we were young, really liked that song. Pretty sure that's the one where he's like, I got soul, but I'm not a soldier. If that's not it, please let me know in the comments. But as you can tell, I'm not too aware of the Killers, so it's not like I've kept up with them. They've had plenty of albums released since those kind of hit tracks that made me aware of them. So let's dive into this a little bit. Pressure Machine. In these music reviews, it's important to be honest with you, but I'm going to try to stay positive. And that's already like, no, I'm just trying to think of what works for me and what doesn't, and not drill in on the stuff that doesn't work for me too hard, because it's all subjective, right? The title of the whole review thing, I was trying to think of like subjective, I couldn't come up with anything. So anyways, Pressure Machine. I threw it on without knowing anything about it. And another reason I had picked this was pitchfork.com. Kind of got a love-hate relationship with that site, because sometimes I just think the stuff that they push as being really good is like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't get it. And then sometimes they really introduce me to stuff I love that I was never going to come across unless I read their articles. So kind of love hate. So I was like, wait a minute, I know the Killers. This is about Utah. I'll take a pitchfork review of something I normally wouldn't check out. So I'm not always just doing reviews of stuff I normally listen to. And so let's go. The Killers. Pressure Machine. It sounds a lot like a Bruce Springsteen record, or maybe kind of trying to do U2. And I did a little bit of quick skimming on Wikipedia about it, so that's as deep as my research goes. And it looks like they had a little bit of an influence there, but yeah, it's definitely a more subdued album than what I was expecting. Mr. Brightside, unfortunately, being one of my only real examples, is definitely has a little more youthful energy, and that guitar line is like very spry and keeps you going. This record, while I did appreciate certain flourishes from the guitar, bass, the mixing on the drums would shift around to kind of let it pop out from time to time. Nothing really stood out too much to me, though. It was very subdued. It's clearly the singer's record, which looks like it was a concept album. Essentially, he wrote all the lyrics to the album prior to writing the album's music, which I do think is an interesting approach to making an album. I'm always interested in how bands and musicians decide to form their records, especially like in the early stages. And essentially, according to this, he tried to reflect on his own childhood. He kind of reflected on certain moments in his childhood, like apparently one song, there's a teenage couple, Tiffany and Raymond, who died in a crossing accident with the Union Pacific train. Another one, song Terrible Things, is written from the perspective of a gay teenager contemplating suicide. And I will say, growing up in Utah, they have, so one element of this album is they have clips of people just talking, which is, a fun little device to use on records. I mean, you see that on Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, amongst many others. But this one, yeah, it had a very Utah tinge to it. It's like, oh, I recognize these voices. And so even not really following the lyrics, like I stated earlier, it's not something I pay much attention to. It's kind of melody first for me. Yeah, even the lyrics and lines like hillbilly heroin pills, and one lady in one of the clips is like, oh heck, like it's very Utah. So it did manage to bubble up some feelings about growing up in a smaller town in Utah, and it is a weird feeling, especially if you're not part of the mainstream in that state. And so, yeah, I have a darkly cynical heart sometimes, and that churned up some old bits of nostalgia and like contemplation. So kudos there. That being said, apparently this album is really described as being Americana, heartland rock, folk rock. Those are all genres that are not my thing. I feel like over the last year or two, I've actually slowly started to wrap my head around that stuff. I said earlier, this album reminds me of Bruce Springsteen and U2. And while both those acts have songs that I really appreciate and like, neither one of those are ones I get super into. Probably more old U2 than ever Bruce Springsteen. But let me see if I can say anything else about this record. It did make me kind of hope, if I was to revisit this band in the future, that I don't know. I guess I've been hearing the folk rock or Americana kind of thing too much with like rock bands lately, at least to me. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong areas, but the Mumford and Sonsification of all these rock bands, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with making an intimate, subdued record. But I just feel like rock and roll needs a little more rock these days. I don't know. So that is definitely what I'm looking for when I'm listening to a rock record. And so maybe this record isn't really for me, but I can definitely appreciate how it was created. I mean, I think he and the band wanted to do something a little more intimate because of COVID-19 and all that. And that makes a lot of sense because, I mean, when that first kicked in, uh, Fiona Apple's album Fetch the Bolt Cutters came out, and just the intimacy of that record and just everything going on and when is stuff going to open up and is it going to get back to normal, all those crazy feelings you would had right at the beginning, like that record overwhelmed me. And I was like, I can't listen to this. Not because I didn't love it. It was just that it was emotionally like, ugh, I feel like a stranger's like looking at me directly in the eyes, not letting me break it, you know? This record, Pressure Machine, it's a little easier to take in. It's like, all right, it's kind of like this dude reading his journal to you. Teenager reading his journal to you. It's kind of how it came off. Yeah, I think that's about all I got. I guess with these reviews also, I'll try to find my favorite song and what instrument or element worked the best for me. And for me, I would say Sleepwalker so far is my favorite track off this record. I think it just had a little more beat to it for me. Once again, this is a one listen album review. It's not how it's always going to be, but I kind of trying to give you the impression right off the cuff. And I definitely get into records more over time. So this isn't the final word on this record by any means. But yeah, Sleepwalker. And I guess in general, I liked some of the flourishes from the guitar player, which I guess the guitar player didn't play on the last record or something like that. Yeah, their guitarist Dave Keuning. Correct me how to say it if you can in the comments. After his absence on the previous album, Imploding the Mirage, he returned to the studio to help them record Pressure Machine, while bassist Mark Stoermer was absent due to difficulties caused by the COVID-19 pandemic during recording. And, you know, not a dig, but I did catch myself listening to the bass lines and just kind of thinking like, they seem kind of uninspired. And unfortunately, in a lot of records, speaking as a bassist, sometimes the bassist is just there. And, you know, some people have a belief that the bass is just there to hold everything down and don't think too hard about it. But I love a good bassist. And if you can hear them and their role in the whole mix, then makes me extra happy. So I pay extra attention to it. So I was a little disappointed there, little disappointed by the subdued nature of it, but it does fit the theme. Singer, yeah, it kind of came off like a bit of a Bruce Springsteen impression. And but interesting lyrical content, even from the little tidbits I picked up. Little guitar flourishes, that was what clicked for me the most. So anyways, I hope that was positive enough for you. I'm not trying to shit on bands that you love or artists. It's all subjective. But thank you for joining me for my first episode of Albummin. Make any recommendations for new albums I should keep an eye out for or do in the future. Like, I'm excited for some new Kendrick Lamar to come out. I'm excited for new Meshuggah record that's on the horizon. I plan on jumping around to all kinds of genres, so just let me know what you would like me to listen to, and I'm hoping that doing these videos will expand my musical horizons even more than I hope they're already wide open. So thank you, and I'll check in with you in the next Jacob Wayne's Albummin It. Ta-ta! You know what? I got so caught up in doing my first review, I didn't even give it a ranking. Now, let me ask you this. Should I even give these albums a ranking, or should you just listen to the whole thing and pick up on what I'm throwing down? I don't know. I could do a ranking if you guys feel like it's valuable. If not, I'll just give you my thinky thinks on albums when they come out. All right. Ta-ta. Hey, if you like that video or any other videos on this channel's, please, oh my God. Hey, if you like that video or any other videos on this channel, please hit that like and subscribe button. And it really helps me out. It helps me keep doing what I love to do. So have a good one.